This painting of some trees looks really quite complicated, but let me show you how to break it down and use these washes and brush strokes to your advantage. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to use a very loose technique. Now I've got my board flat down to the table, I haven't got this on any angle, and I'm going to splatter on some paint to create these leaf effects and using very much the technique that we've just seen, putting in shadows and tones and varied colours. Now I'm going to start in this top left hand corner. We've got quite a vague area of leaves there, and that could cause a fair bit of confusion when you're actually painting. So suggest it, and that's what I'm doing here. One or two bits of stippling, the spattering technique there to create the varied effects of these leaves. This is a mix of sap green and lemon yellow. And now I'm using a very loose approach to just block in the colours in this hedgerow. Let's give it some variety by adding some raw sienna, mixing these colours on the paper. And really this is the variegated wash, only really quite loose. I've deliberately used a loose drawing as well, just quite vague, so that it really makes me think about the paint that I'm putting on the paper and helps me to concentrate on the colours rather than filling in outlines. Touch of ultramarine there into the wash. Now we've got quite a darker bush in the midground there. I'm just putting that in with some French ultramarine mixed with the raw sienna. Look how that's really blending there. That's lovely how that's softly blending in. We're not worried about edges and details at this stage. This is really just a case of putting in the colours that you can see. A little bit of stippling up here. I'm working left to right, making sure again that I'm keeping the wash flowing. I've got a wet leading edge to the wash. I'm only using 4 colours, and look how much variety that we've created already just by using these colours. And I'm using 3 colours in the main. The 4th colour was the raw sienna. This tree up here is really quite strong. Now I'm not going full strength at this stage, but it's quite important to try to get the colour relatively right. So I'm using the French ultramarine. It's much more shadowed. French ultramarine with the sap green. There's 1 or 2 gaps showing through the tree there, so it doesn't matter if you paint over those, but it's nice if you see them and you can capture that effect. This is the stippling technique, really quite quickly, look. Now let's blockade the rest of these trees. We've got a run back happening here. That's really because I've been using quite a loose technique, a loose approach, and we've used fluid paint over on the right. This has been drying on the left. I'm not particularly worried about it. Run backs aren't something that you should always avoid. I mean, if it happened in the sky, then maybe you'd want to do something about it, but it's in the trees, in the foliage, and it's probably going to help to suggest one or two bits of texture. So they're nice on occasions, especially in a situation like this. And this is just an initial wash. I'm going to be working on top once this is dried, so it will cover if I want to cover it. Now there's just one or two bits of paint built up there. Let me take those off before we get problems with that. Remember, something like this, you're not aiming for perfection, you're just really putting in the colours at this stage. That's the main wash put in, and just before I go any further, have a look at the overall effect of that wash. We've got warm colours, we've got cool colours, we've got pale tones, we've got darker tones, and all this effect is really helping to suggest the three-dimension, the cooler areas, the warmer areas, and it's going to do so much for the rest of the painting. So what I want to do now is to pick up on the edges. Really the important thing is to look for lighter edges against darker edges. So I'm mixing up some sap green with French ultramarine, and I'll add a touch of light red into that mix just to grey off the green slightly, and that's going to give me this darker area in the background. Now I'm not going in for the dark that's there. I'm going to build this up in layers of watercolour, so really you've got to hold off the darks and the details till the later stages. What I'm interested in now is creating the shapes. I'm just using this stippling technique again to pull out some of these tree shapes. Now that's really quite dark all the way up. And whilst I'm putting this wash on, just look, I've covered up the run back, it's disappeared. So no need to worry about things like that when they happen, especially if you're painting over again, layering up in the way that I'm doing here. Now I'm going to look at the track, and although the light in this picture is quite subdued, I'm going to try and increase the contrast and give it much more light and shade and depth. So just for the track colour, we'll put some raw sienna in where it's really quite warm, and I'm fading that away into the white paper. The light intensity tends to bleach out colours, and into that wash put some light red to warm it up there. You can see how that's really turning quite warm. Warmer colours tend to come more towards the foreground, cooler colours tend to work more in the background. So the blues, the ultramarines more in the background, and the warmer reds and yellows further forward. Okay, I'll let that dry and then we'll build up some more textures in further layers.